Good afternoon, Valerie.
Hey, Michelle, how are you?
I'm awesome. We are live. I'm so excited to have you here on Michelle's Conversations That Matter.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to talk to you and answer questions from the audience and just have a really authentic, great conversation.
Yeah, me too. Me too. And it's so cool because I haven't done one of my episodes in a very long time. I don't know if it's just because I've been busy with all of my clients or what, but I was so excited to get this one on the books and scheduled. And it's been exciting, and it's been great to get to know you and follow your work as well. I'm excited to have you here. And just before we went live, I was like, Valerie, remind me how we met, because I was trying to remember like how we met, and you shared with me that you heard me on a podcast.
I did. And, sometimes you just have that gut feeling of, I need to talk to this person. I need to reach out. And I was so pleased. I went on LinkedIn and I saw we had some mutual connections. And I thought, oh, that's great. Maybe she'll actually read my message and we can connect that way. And so glad we did, because I really passionate about sharing about mental health and raising awareness of mental health issues in the workplace and supporting people that are going through it. And it was awesome.
Yeah, it's so cool. And of course, I mean, you and I were just talking before we went live about like the people that organically reach out to you because you're an author or you were on a podcast. Like, I will never not respond to someone. It's so special, you know?
It is. And we don't do this for the fame and fortune, or at least that's not how I got into it. It was just to help other people. And so the opportunity to connect with people is amazing.
Amazing. Awesome. Okay, so we're talking about quite a few different topics today because you have quite a different assortment of things to talk about. So the title of this episode is My Unscripted Life, which is based on your book, Life Unscripted. Unscripted.
Off script,
Off script.
a mom's journey through adoption, a husband's alcoholism, and special needs parenting. It's a mouthful.
That's a lot. That's a lot. Okay, so and you came out. Look at you. You came out perfect. No, we'll talk about it. But just for the benefit of the audience and for those who are here, thank you for so much for being here, spending some time with us on this Friday afternoon. I would love for you, Valerie, just introduce yourself to the audience, who you are, where you live, what you do for a living. That'd be great.
Well, my name is Valerie Cantella. I call myself a recovering perfectionist, and I'm a multi-passionate professional working in communications and public affairs. We help organizations get their projects through the entitlement process with a city. That sounds very vague and out there, but I love to write and I love to share my story and help others. And I get to do that through a variety of ways, my book and through writing articles. I am a mom of three, a son, Nick, who is almost 25, and he's my biological son. My adopted daughter, Katie, from Russia, she is 23. And then my bonus son by marriage, Adam, he is turning 19 this Monday. So
Wow.
live in California, live in Santa Barbara, and love walking on the beach with my dog, Charlie, and spending time with my husband, Tom. So super grateful to be here and grateful for the life I have today.
Amazing. Gratitude is everything. I say that all the time.
For sure.
Yeah, for sure. For sure. And it's just so easy to focus on the things that don't work instead of the things that do. So I always love when I hear someone say that they're grateful. So thanks for sharing that.
Of course.
So let's dive right in. I am so excited to learn about Off Script. Tell us more about Off Script. This is your memoir, essentially. Why you wrote it, why did you write it, and what did you learn in that writing process?
Yeah, I call it my COVID baby because I started in February of 2021 and published it in February of 2022. And it just really felt like it was the time where I had gone through this situation and felt like I could tell the story without losing it, crying all the time. And when I was in the midst of the story, and I will tell you what the story is in just a second, but in the midst of the story, I knew that I wanted to help others with it. And once I could get through the most challenging times, how could I convey the lessons I learned? And so I appreciate the opportunity to share today. But The story focuses on my process with my adopted daughter, Katie, who was adopted from Russia when she was 16 months old and has much more severe special needs than I ever anticipated when my first husband and I adopted her. And I don't know about you, but actually, I do know about you because I've read your book. So we have very different growing up stories. But in my growing up story, I have a wonderful family, parents that loved me and invested in me. And I believed that if I loved God, loved my family, and served others, I would have this perfect life, the script, as I call it. And so I tried to do all those things, and it really led me down a path of perfectionism, trying to create this perfect life. And then, of course, when my life goes off script with my adoption, then being married to an alcoholic, and eventually dealing with mental health issues with both of my children, I felt like the off script part of my life was my fault. And I questioned my worth and had a ton of shame about it, and came to eventually be a recovering perfectionist because I realized it wasn't my fault. There wasn't a script for life, even though I believe there was, and just getting through that difficult journey. So that's in a nutshell the story.
It's so interesting. I think there are a lot of more people out there than not that have like this idealistic expectation that they're trying to live into. I mean, I hear it when I'm coaching my clients that like they're in complete disagreement with the reality of what is, but it still is what it is, right? And
Right.
so there's a great book by Byron Katie called Loving
Yes.
What Is, right?
Love it.
And I try really hard to remind people that it's the expectation. Like I even get tripped up on it. The expectation of something. If it doesn't unfold like that expectation, then we set ourselves up for disappointment. So we have to manage those expectations and realize that life is always perfect. Like life is unfolding for our highest good, and even in the adversity, right? So
Yeah.
but it's I could appreciate what you're saying with the off script because it wasn't how you had envisioned it to be.
Right. And I grew up in a community where I didn't even know people whose lives were off script. I kind of grew up in a little bit of a bubble where everyone seemed to be very similar to what my story was. And so I wasn't equipped. I didn't have the tools to understand that when life doesn't go as planned, how do you handle that adversity? And, now that I have adult children and they've had some really difficult times, I appreciate and I try to convey to them, look, you've developed some skill sets that I never learned to develop because I didn't have the type of adversity that you have gone through. And so, even though it's really hard, our job as parents is to help equip you for life. And life comes with adversity. And the more we can accept what is and um, understand that there's nothing wrong with us when things go wrong, the more fulfilled we'll feel and comfortable in our own skin we'll feel.
So let's talk a little bit about this perfectionism. Because I see this a lot. People have a need for everything, especially type A personality people. They have to have it just so in order for them to relax. And to give themselves permission to relax, that means everything has to be taken care of. And I see this all the time, but the problem with that is that it's at the expense of their health. So I see them trending toward burnout because it has to be a certain way. And no matter what it takes, loss of sleep or balance in your life or spending time with your family, it has to be. And so I've been having more and more conversations with my clients around, well, can we get to a point of good enough? Can we get to, is it good enough, and is good enough able to afford you the opportunity to catch your breath so that you can play the long game, right?
Right.
That seems to be like the big thing, is that their health is getting compromised. Share with us a little bit about the perfectionism in your journey and sort of what you learned about perfectionism.
Yeah. So much of what you said resonates with me. And I think I was always a very type A kid. I liked everything ordered, and I grew up with parents that are highly organized, and we had a very calm, non-chaotic life. So order to me creates security and comfortness. It brings comfort to me. But then when I was 10, I was diagnosed with type 1 diabetes and was told, you have to manage your blood sugars, and you have to control your food, and you have to control your stress, and control. And if you don't do this, then you will have serious long-term impacts. And so I think that really set me off into being a perfectionist, because I was believing that if I wasn't perfect, I would be damaging my health. And then at 21, I was diagnosed with diabetic kidney disease and told I would probably have to have a kidney transplant, which further imprinted on my brain that I needed to be perfect. And the reason I was having this diabetic kidney disease was because I hadn't been perfect. And so then that set me down a whole other path of unworthiness and striving for perfection and control. And if I can control everything, then it will all be okay. And I did that for a really long time, because on the outside, perfectionism really does feel like it serves you. You can be high performing at work, you get accolades, people
Yeah.
look up to you.
Mhm.
But like you said, it takes such a toll on you as a person. And so it wasn't till my daughter really, her situation started crumbling when she was in junior high. And that's how I start the book. People can read the first chapter for free on my website. I call it The Crumbling of the Facade. And that was also the emerging of my recovering perfectionist, because I realized I couldn't keep aiming toward this facade, which was unfulfilling. And since I've given up that kind of approach, people have said, yeah, you were super intimidating and you look like you had it all together.
Mhm.
And now people come and talk to me, strangers. Oh, I have a friend that needs help with their special needs child. And by sharing my authentic story, I am able to show that recovering from perfectionism is much more fulfilling. And it also takes up so much brain space to be perfectionist and control everything. And with my diabetes, even, I have written a post called The Gift of Good Enough. And instead of hyper focusing on everything I eat and all the exercise and stress and water and such, I just told my doctor I was done. I couldn't do all of that all the time. And my blood sugars I have the same average value as I had when I was micromanaging perfectionism. So,
Mm.
but now I have all this space to write a book and
Yeah.
to do all these other creative endeavors, which I love, because I don't spend all that energy being a perfectionist.
Yeah. I want to talk about the facade because I know there was a time in my life where I was so concerned about the facade, right? And and we are victims of, of this, what we see on social media, right? Let's just talk about social media, like how it is a curated reflection of reality.
Yes.
But like, what was that like to? Because I know, there's a lot of people that hide behind the perfectionism. I want to show up a certain way. I want people to respect me. I want them to take me seriously. But then when things start to go a little sideways in your real life, like, it takes something to keep up a facade, right?
It totally takes a toll on you to keep up a facade. And I think what I realized about myself is that nobody was judging me the way I was judging myself.
Mm.
So, I was keeping up this facade because I was looking at myself and saying, well, if you can't look a certain way at church, or, you're not baking homemade goodies for the PTA, then you're a bad person, where I would never say that to anyone else. So it's that negative self-talk that we engage in. I think a lot of perfectionists do it, and
Mhm.
it's so damaging, because I compared myself less. And granted, when I was a kid, we didn't have social media. So that's a whole other layer and component for the people that are younger than we are. that they're facing every day, that social media creation, because I tend to, well, I've done a social media cleanse where I just go through my feed and I unfollow people that don't serve me and don't build up the person and the character I want to be as an adult,
Mhm.
because I don't need those negative images.
Yeah. Yeah, it's true. I always say that, like, comparison really is a thief of joy.
Absolutely.
And we don't even realize we're doing it oftentimes when we're on social media. We're looking at other people and like what they're doing and how they look and all of these things. And you just go, wow, like, okay. Um, so let's talk a little bit about some of the lessons. Like, you had those three experiences that you highlight in your book: the adoption, the partner with alcoholism, and then being a parent of special needs child. What what did you learn? What did you learn through those three experiences? And was there a common theme, a common thread that you sort of take from each of those?
Yeah, and actually a common three thread that just weaves all three together. So, just some perspective, my daughter's special needs, she is autistic, which we didn't find out till high school, but she has reactive attachment disorder, which means she doesn't know how to attach properly to other people. She also had some emerging mental health issues in junior high, which led to multiple psychiatric hospital stays, and she has fetal alcohol syndrome, just a myriad of diagnoses. And because she was adopted and people knew about that story, I didn't feel as judged for that situation. But then there was this whole scenario of my husband being an alcoholic, which I didn't even acknowledge until 18 years into our marriage that it could be a possibility. And I was hiding that side of myself. And so and I didn't have anyone to talk to about that, because to ask the question, what does alcoholism look like? Is my husband drinking too much? Would open the door to the fact that we weren't this nice little perfect family of four. And in my church environment, it wasn't. I didn't feel safe saying I think my husband may be an alcoholic, because people just didn't talk about that. Whereas if he would have had cancer, that would have been a much more common topic. And so that, and then my son started using and misusing drugs when he was in high school, probably as his coping mechanism.
Yeah.
And I didn't even know who to ask for help for that. And I just kept these things so tightly, all three of those situations, because I was embarrassed. I felt like it was my fault. If I was smart enough, I would have figured out a solution. And all three of those things have taught me that I need to reach out. We need to reach out to each other. We need to find the communities that are available to us. And with my daughter's combination of issues, there wasn't a support group that was easy to find. It wasn't like go to the adoption support group or go to the autism support group. But I found an amazing recovery community in going to Al Anon and talking with other people, loved ones of alcoholics and addicts, who share together, because we have these people in our lives that have a disease. And I've learned so much from being in that program of recovery, how to not be in control of everything, how to love the alcoholic without enabling them.
Mhm.
And then finding the mental health supports. I
Mhm.
eventually found a support group that is associated with NAMI, the National Association of Mental Illness,
Mhm.
for parents of teenagers. And it was the one place I felt like I could go and talk about the struggles my kids were having, because parents show up at school, PTA volunteers, super mom, and there's this somewhat expectation that we have control of our kids. Like, oh, they should be the star athlete or the star student, or where's your kid going to college? Okay, well, my son didn't even graduate from high school, but he has an amazing life and career now through his own experience, through going through rehab and stopping using drugs. And
Mhm.
it's amazing. And I could have never envisioned it, but that's not the feeling that you get when you're at the high school campus.
Right.
There's a competitiveness to it, which is
Right.
strange.
Hmm. I think, when so being that we both wrote deeply personal books, we were talking about this before we went live about how like you have people that will come up to you and start talking to you like they know you because they have like you said you were just like naked on stage and they sort of now know everything about you but you know nothing about them. It's such a wild experience. But being that we both like wrote these books that were very revealing and honest and authentic, for me, at the end of my book, I wrote an epilogue because through the whole healing journey, I was able to sort of find the silver lining and like, what did I learn? And how did the experiences with my mother and my ex-husband and my childhood, like, how did those experiences then really turn out to serve me? Like something I could never see years ago. But like I wrote this epilogue at the end of my book to highlight, listen, yeah, all that stuff happened and it serves me now, especially in the work that I'm doing. What would you say some of the greatest lessons for you were from your journey and the experiences that you had, but then also unearthing all of that into a book?
Yeah. Well, it just as you said, I felt like I was standing naked on stage when I got to the point of I had sent the book off to I think it was to be formatted or whatever in the process and I realized, "Oh my gosh, everybody's going to know this story." I had checked with all my family members, "How do you feel about this?" and gotten really positive responses even from my ex-husband who was the alcoholic in the subject of the book. And, it was well, during the writing process, it was really hard because it's like doing constant therapy and further refining you and helping you process the difficult times, but it was so rewarding, and when I said to my now husband, "Hey, I wanna write a book, and I'm gonna have to spend some money of ours to do it because I wanna self-publish," and he said, "Well, it's cheaper than therapy." And I said, "Oh, that's true. If I went through all those hours of therapy, it would have cost more." But also the opportunity that not only could I process my stuff, I could help others in the journey. And I really want people to feel encouraged and not feel alone in their journeys. Know that someone else has gone through this. And I mean, I reveal a lot of really unimaginable things in the book. And I wrote it because it's the book that I needed in my journey. I didn't know people went through things. I didn't know that people's lives went off script. My whole faith journey changed because of my experiences and who I believe that God is and how I approach that in my own community. And but what are the lessons? The lessons are that we need each other. We need other people. I realized that I had a false narrative on the world and that we had to be perfect and that God would only love me if I was lovable, as opposed to I believe that there's nothing we can do to make God love us more and there's nothing we can do to make him love us less. This whole exploration of self compassion did a lot of Kristen Neff work. She's that self compassion speaker. But just I feel like I've grown into the fullness of who I was supposed to be, whereas when I was a perfectionist in this little box of my facade, I wasn't a great person. I mean, I wanted to be a nice and loving person, but now I look at myself back then and think, "Okay, now what you see is what you get, and if you meet me on the street and you say I'm struggling with this, I will be more than happy to listen to people, provide resources, connect them, find the support group, however I can help." And I love that I can do that now, and I also love that I understand boundaries and what works for me as opposed to what works for the other person or what do I perceive works for the other person.
Mm. How do you and how did you, and I don't know how relevant this is. So, I have a very dear friend who has a child with special needs, and I'm in awe by her, by the fact that she finds a way to navigate all of her challenges and make her son like very, very important in her routine, in her life. Like I see the love, I see the connection, I see the commitment. How do you how have you learned to create that balance for yourself? Right? Like because it's probably very easy to be completely selfless in those instances. So what have you learned around creating space for you?
Yeah, I love that question because I think as parents in general, we want so much for our kids and we'll go to the ends of the earth for them at at the loss of our own health, our own mental health, mental wellness. For me, when my daughter was going through some really difficult times and I was researching residential treatment centers, I would spend hours and hours and hours trying to find the place for her, researching over 100 uh, residential treatment centers throughout the United States. And I realized I needed to stop. I needed to get sleep. I was a more functional parent if I got sleep. And so I eventually started saying, okay, you can spend 1 hour today doing this instead of 5 hours, and putting some parameters to protect my own self and my own health. And then when she was at residential treatment centers, she was at 4 over the course of her high school experience. They would call with incident reports of basically how she was acting out against other people or against herself. They would call to say she bit a staff member or she's banging her head on the wall or whatever it was that day. And I took it so personally every time. And so I eventually just set boundaries with the staff and said, there is a level of a report that I don't need to hear because I cannot do anything about it from thousands of miles away. And so I would encourage everyone, even, with their special needs children living at home, to kind of figure out what the boundaries, like what are the things that are really hurting you as yourself, that you have some control over that you can change. It doesn't mean that you don't love your child less, but we have to put on the mask before we can help our child. And if we don't fill ourselves up and take care of ourselves, we won't be able to do that.
Great advice. I mean, it's so true. It's so true. Like I even reflect back when I was caring for my mom, like there there I could give, 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 and then, I was still asked to give more.
Mhm.
And the only person that can dictate that that changes was me, but like you need someone to almost give you the permission and the support and the acknowledgement that it's okay to create those boundaries.
Well, I love the phrase, and I was learning it this month because this month's been crazy. Instead of just saying, "Yes, I'd love to do that," it's, "Yes, I'd love to do that. Can I get back to you in a couple weeks? I'm just maxed out right now." And no one has said, "No, a couple weeks won't work for me." They'll be happy to accommodate your schedule.
Yeah.
And yet there's something about the people pleasing part of me that wants to say yes right away. And it's those small mindset shifts that we can use to just constantly create a better life for ourselves and our
Any
others around us when we figure out how to do it better.
Yeah, I mean, I say this all the time. I say you want to show up the best version of yourself, you got to nurture yourself. The people
Absolutely.
that you love and the people who love you don't deserve someone who's like got one foot on a banana peel.
Yeah. That is a good phrase. I love that.
Um, any other words of advice around perfectionism for the person that's listening right now who might have that perfectionism and needs to sort of figure a way to navigate that better?
Yeah, for me as a perfectionist, I found that my ego was getting in the way of my health and wellness, and I see perfectionism as an extension of my ego.
Mhm.
And so I would just recommend that you think about that, and is your perfectionism getting in the way of the rest of your life? Because perfectionism, like I said earlier, does serve us at times, but we can be high performing and have high standards without being a perfectionist. And so I realize now that when I was really in my perfectionist journey, there were a lot of things I didn't do because I didn't want to be embarrassed. I wasn't willing to try. I wouldn't, try an athletic exercise because I'm not particularly athletic. And I my life wasn't as rich as it could have been because I was so worried about being embarrassed. And
Mm.
now that I've kind of given that up, it's like, okay, well, I can try pickleball. And if I'm not great at it, I've tried it and I had a good social time with my family. My parents are great pickleball players and I am not, but that's okay. It's fun. And how can we kind of take it down a notch? Like, do we have to be to the nth degree of everything? And
Mm.
I am actually working on a recovering perfectionist workbook and talking about, acknowledging, accepting, and action. What can we first? We have to acknowledge some of the behaviors that are affecting us, and being able to reflect and write about or set down what are these things that we're doing, and we may not even realize them, and how can we do them differently?
It's like the strong desire to look good. Like, where does that come from? I think there's some work to do there when you can look in the mirror and say, why is it so important that I look good to everybody around me? Why is that so important? And try to like unpack that.
Well, and for me, so I'm learning that there are several different domains of perfectionism. So it's the exterior body that I have to look and dress perfectly, and then there's the interior work, and then there's the perfectionism that we expect others to be perfect.
Yeah.
And for me, I think I really strove to be perfect in my performance because I felt like I wasn't good enough. I
Yes.
wasn't pretty enough. I wasn't skinny enough. I didn't have the best clothes all the time. And so I thought, okay, well, if I can be really good at organizing and I can be a really good writer, I can be a really good employee, that
Approve.
will make up for this
Yes.
less thanness over here. And it's so silly because no one is thinking about what the number on the scale for me way is or what my gene size is. I'm thinking about that, but no one else cares. They want me to be a really authentic, loving, amazing human.
Yes.
And I'm not saying my parents didn't teach that me with for me. I don't know how I got that message, but somehow I got the message that I wasn't physically good enough. Well, I think it goes back to the diabetes because I had a defective body as a kid and I still have that same defective organ, but I have a very full life and thankful for the technology that allows me to live a very vibrant whole life in spite of that. But I don't know.
Yeah.
I really am trying to encourage self-love and body image and all
Yes.
those things. And I think I can't believe I'm in my 50s and I'm still working on this stuff.
I know. I was just gonna say the same thing. Like in my 20s, yeah, it was big, but like I'm still 50 and I'm still struggling with this. Like, what is
Yeah.
that? Is this like a lifelong battle we will always struggle with? It's crazy.
Well, my husband says we have to have at least one thing so that we're not perfect. It takes, keeps our heads not big.
Ah, I think the key is to always remain curious and always remain looking because the moment that we think that we have it all figured out, like something's going to rear its head and we're going to be like, oh, nope, don't have that figured out quite yet.
Yeah, well, it's like someone said, it might be a famous person's analogy. Life is like a canoe, and if the lesson you see a canoe floating by and you don't catch it at that time, it'll circle around on the river back to you, and you'll have to learn it the next time. So get in that canoe and deal with that white water ahead, so that you don't have to have the lesson keep coming back to you.
Amen to that. Amen to that. So, what's next for you? What are you up to? Tell me a little bit more about what you're up to, how people can reach you, all the good stuff.
Yeah. So I am super open to kind of what is coming my way. And it's been a really exciting year. I just did an article for NAMI on my experience of parenting. So you can check that out on the NAMI website, nami.org, under my name, Valerie Cantella. Like I said, I'm working on a recovering perfectionist workbook and trying to not let the perfectionist part of me prevent me from getting it out there in the world. But people can find me on my website, valeriecantella.com. I'm also on Instagram, Valerie J. Cantella. And if you are struggling with an alcoholic spouse or a child with mental health special needs, or even getting into drugs and alcohol addiction, please do not hesitate to reach out to me. And I mean that sincerely. My goal in writing this book and doing all this work is to help others. And if I can connect you with the right people, or if I can provide a word of encouragement, I would love to do that. And if you'd like to read my book, it's on most major booksellers, but the ebook and the paperback are on Amazon.
Amazing. Amazing. I remember when we first connected, I just felt like, you know, it was so cool because it was such an organic connection. We did a video chat, and I just remember feeling like connected to you in just like a really cool way. Like you were like a sister from a long, distance, that like we somehow, found each other and navigated some stuff in our life, and we're up to the same thing about helping people. So it's pretty cool.
I love that. And I love that one of the things that we learned from the pandemic is we can video chat and we can connect with
Great.
people across the country. And it's amazing. And so I feel the same way about you and your work. It's so needed in the world. And I'm excited that the mental health conversation is becoming more part of the daily narrative. It's just incredible.
Yeah, it really is. It really is. We got to keep beating the drum, and
Yes.
it'll continue. Thank you so much for spending some of your time today with me here on Michelle's Conversations That Matter.
Thank you, Michelle. So great to be here.
Awesome. And have a great weekend. And thank you for everyone who joined us today. It was great to see all the numbers popping up. So thank you so much for being here, and stay tuned. We'll see you again soon.
Bye.
Bye.